I really want to thank everyone today for joining us in this interview in this very serious matter, where our personal freedoms are our main concern. Our freedom of association, our freedom of religion, our freedom to move, our freedom to associate is so dear to us as South Africans. And I really want to thank Wayne Thring, who is the Deputy President of the ACDP, that has welcomed the people on this channel that have asked for the ACDP to show how they feel about freedom, where they stand on freedom, and to share that with you, the people of this country, so that you can be informed and decide how you can support this fight that we have for freedom. And I really want to thank you for joining us, Wayne. I really appreciate your time and effort. And I would ask you to please introduce yourself, your background, and why you are in the fight for freedom.
Well, thank you, Desmond, for the opportunity, and thank you also to those who contacted you asking to bring the ACDP onto your show and onto your program. We really appreciate it. My name, as you said, is Wayne Thring. I serve as the Deputy President of the African Christian Democratic Party. I joined the ACDP in 1995, a young man who started a branch, having received a call from God to get back into politics. I started a branch for the ACDP, became the Deputy Chairman of the province, and then the Chairman of the province, and then eventually the provincial leader of for the ACDP in KZN. Then elected to the Federal Council of Provinces, the Chairman of the Federal Council of Provinces, and currently now the Deputy President of the ACDP. I also serve at a national level for the party. 2019, I was elected to represent the ACDP at National Parliament. Desmond, I'm married and been happily married for 31 years. Leona and I celebrated 31 years of marriage on the 22nd of September this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The Lord has blessed us with 3 beautiful children, Timothy, Esther, and Daniel. And we also have three grandchildren. So that is my family background, political background in essence. And currently I serve also as the pastor of Kingdom Connect Ministries, where I joined when I first gave my heart to the Lord in 1984. One church, one wife, one God.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm sure it will resonate with many of the people listening now. You know, to me, religious freedom is such a core part of the values of any successful society, and not having that freedom is a huge burden on humanity, the human soul. And it's something I speak about at length, and it's not popular in the world that we live in today. And therefore, I came up with 10 very specific questions that I want to ask you that you can speak freely on. And as we go through these questions, share your feelings, your open feelings, and then the people of the country can see, and maybe you can see and think about things that you might consider differently in future. I have no expectation of any of these interviews. To me, these are things that I have seen have taken people's freedom away in the country. And the first thing that is basically the entry to this questionnaire of 10 questions is whether any party or individual will actually pass this basic test criteria of whether they will ensure individual liberty over collective good ideology. And do you perhaps have comment for me on that? Just a brief comment.
Well, I think very clearly the ACDP has always supported the individual liberties and the inalienable rights given to us by the Lord himself. God gives us certain inalienable rights that no man can take away. And one of those inalienable rights is the right to choose. God himself does not force us to choose him as his God. But there are other rights that we as the ACDP certainly protect. Your rights such as your freedom of thought, freedom of expression, the freedom of the press, freedom of movement, freedom of association, and certainly the freedom of religion. But I think also more importantly in the times that we are living is your freedom to bodily integrity and what you allow or do not or disallow to enter into your body. So these particular rights of the individual, the ACDP will vociferously and strongly defend. And we are on record for doing that.
I really want to thank you for that explanation. And it's clear that you passed the entry to the test, because some of the parties in government actually don't pass the entry criteria. The top three political movements or parties in the government, they battle with that because the greater good ideology that reasons that individual liberty can stand aside and that you can reason individual liberty aside, as they are trying to make this mainstream. And I'm very concerned about that myself personally. And I really
and
want
rightfully so, Des. I think we all need to be concerned when these particular liberties, individual liberties, come under attack. We need to be concerned.
To me, individual liberty is at the crux. The fact that, that we have a right to make choices and give anyone else that same right. If you don't want to believe in anything, that you have a right to do that. And that you don't force that on someone else. That to me is vital.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the questions. Number one. Okay, and it's a very open-ended question. So you can ask for guidance if you want to. It says, are you pro-current constitution? And then I put in brackets, do you consider that system change might be necessary or that we should directly elect our leaders in future? So let me leave it at that.
Okay. well, let me state firstly that the ACDP believes in a constitutional democracy, that any country needs to have a constitution to guide it, to protect it, so that there are no situations where certain individuals are treated in one way and others in another way, that everybody becomes equal before the law, for example. So we believe in a constitutional democracy. Okay. But having said that, the ACDP, I think, is the only party that voted against the Constitution when the Constitution was drafted in 1996, going into 1997. And the reasons why we voted against the Constitution was purely because of our conscience, our moral conscience. We could not see ourselves supporting a constitution that went against some of the basic tenets of God's word. And currently, in terms of what we have in the Constitution that, for example, supports the termination of pregnancy, the Constitution that supports the civil unions, the Constitution that supports the proliferation of pornography as adult choice, the Constitution that allows gambling to take place, where gambling destroys the family and small business. So these are some of the reasons why the ACDP voted against the Constitution. And clearly, where the Constitution even now is being meddled with to allow for the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation. The ACDP has been vocal in saying that the Constitution, we vote against that particular amendment because it is a danger to our country, a danger to our people, and certainly a danger to our food security. And these are just some of the reasons why we do not support that amendment to the Constitution.
So you would be open to changing the Constitution?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. We would be open to changing the Constitution where we actually find that it is in breach of the value system that most South Africans, we believe, adhere to. People talk about a plurality of religion, that there's a pluralism that that embraces, all kinds of religions and so on. But they fail to realize that in South Africa, we actually have 70 to 80% of the population that professes to be Christian, and the value systems of the vast majority of South Africans are being trampled upon, and the Constitution does not take that into effect.
Okay, now that's the one portion of the Constitution. So I'm happy with your explanation that you are willing to make changes to the Constitution. So you don't believe it's the Holy Grail. And I have my reasons for not trusting the current Constitution. As far as I can see it, there's many reasons for that, including the fact that the Constitution does not allow you to protect your life. It gives the government the right to protect your life. And therefore, our Minister of Police is trying to put in bills where it doesn't give you the right to actually own a firearm to protect your own life. Okay, this is actually to get in line with the Constitution, because our Constitution says you only have a right to life, not a right to protect your life. We have laws that say that, but those laws will be changed to get in line with the Constitution. So there's many other things in the Constitution that I see as Trojan horses that were built in. But this is not about me. This is about you.
Well, Desmond, let me say, this is one of the reasons why South Africa has one of the highest crime rates in the world. When we have pieces of legislation that protects criminals rather than the innocent civilians and citizens of the country. Government's responsibility, yes, is to protect its citizens, but currently government is failing in that with that responsibility to protect its citizens. When one looks at the recent protests and the riots, the last defense of our democracy in those riots, the last defense to our homes and the last defense to businesses was ordinary citizens who had the right to arm themselves, and ordinary citizens who saw it as their inalienable right to defend their lives, their properties, their families. And when this right gets taken away, then anarchy exists, and we cannot allow for that to happen.
So we're actually at quite a serious point in what we call a democracy now. And to me, really, the only democratic thing that takes place in South Africa at the moment is voting. Because to me, the rest of the system is rigged against people that believe in democracy or freedom. But that's a debate for another day. The next question I want to ask you on Constitution, because you've passed the first part, and that is if you will consider system change. In other words, the way we elect our leaders in future, where parties don't hold the power, but individuals can be elected. In other words, we can elect our president directly, elect our MPs directly, elect our mayors directly, elect our councillors directly, which you can do at this stage because you can stand as an independent. In our Constitution currently, it says that we are a multi-party democracy, and we're the only country in the world that I'm aware of where the parties hold all the power. And it becomes very difficult to hold people to account. But this is a system we find ourselves in. Have you ever had any discussions with it in the ACDP on system change, actually changing the Electoral Act?
We have had some discussions, and I think as the ACDP, as a growing party, we to some extent, and let me be upfront, I think to some extent have found ourselves to some extent between the rock and a hard place. So as the ACDP, because with your proportional representation with the multi-party democracy, it allowed for a party like the ACDP to have a voice. It allowed for a party like the ACDP to have representation in parliament, representation in council. Without that particular system, a smaller party like the ACDP would have lost its voice. If you have, for example, certain countries have thresholds. You have to have, for example, more than 5%, where there's a multi-party democracy system. You have to have more than 5% before, for example, you can be accepted. But with the ACDP having obtained just over 1% of the vote, we still have a representation. So, like I said, it puts us between a rock and a hard place. But what we do agree with is that all political parties must be accountable to the people, not accountable to their political party, not accountable to the powers within their political party or the leaders within their political party, but all those who have been elected into the different spheres of government must be held accountable by the people. And yes, I think as our democracy matures, we will, as the ACDP, we will certainly consider system change as our democracy, because I do believe that South Africans are now maturing. And when it comes to voting, it is no longer just emotional, it's no longer just historical, but I think it's becoming more a vote based on informed decisions and intelligent decisions.
Yeah, the one thing that I think is more important is to educate South Africans to understand what they are voting for and what democracy means, because without that, you can't have a democracy cannot work and it'll fail. And that's why people will blame democracy when democracy is not at fault. We are actually not practicing democracy, and that is the problem. And the multi-party system is not a democratic system. In the UK, they are elect their MPs directly. So you vote for the person. Right. Do you understand? That person can stand under a certain party ticket, but they vote for a person. And that person can be held accountable and removed.
Right.
Currently, people are hiding behind parties. And I believe the system was set up for us to fail. That's just my own personal take. And there are certainly large pushes right now for a direct election system where you can still be associated with a party, but that party has no more power. Because at the moment, who elects the president of the country?
Well, I think that clearly at the position of the ACDP as well is that it shouldn't be the election of the president of the party shouldn't be as it is. I think that it is the people who ought to elect and not the ruling or the winning party of the day. Your president ought to come from the people, because what happens is that the president then becomes compromised. He becomes compromised by his position, like we currently have in South Africa. He becomes compromised by his allegiance to his political party and having to keep to the values and the norms and the ideology of that political party, even if it goes against the citizens of the country. And that is untenable. So I think we certainly, as the ACDP, support an election of the president which is not party or politically attached or based, but the citizens of the country should be able to elect the president of their choice, and that president should be able to come from the rank and file of our country.
You know, the basis of this question of mine is whether you are willing to look at system change. In other words, to improve the democracy.
The simple answer is yes.
Because at the moment, a lot of parties say, no, it has to remain the way it is. And so you passed the first question. So congratulations on that.
Okay.
And it's really refreshing. Question number 2, does your plan strive towards irrelevance? Now, a lot of people will think, what kind of a question is that? Okay.
Sure.
And a lot of people might find it surprising and shocking. Does your plan for the future strive towards you as a movement, party, whatever, to becoming irrelevant? I don't know if you understand what I mean by that.
I'm going to try to answer. I'm going to try to answer the question as I understand it. Some of the teachings that we give is that a leader, for example, needs to work himself out of a position by ensuring that there is succession in place, and that there's proper succession in place. So when that particular leader exits, there is no vacuum. So I think that if I also understand your question by the ACDP or a political party making itself irrelevant, it speaks to also a devolution, I think, of power and of responsibility. So, so I think that certainly in terms of our teaching and in terms of our practice within the ACDP, we believe in the aspect of succession, and that you should not have a focus purely on one particular leader or, in this particular case, one particular party. There needs to be broad leadership and broad consensus. It is for that reason also that the ACDP holds to a federal system. So if one looks at our policies and our constitution, the ACDP believes in the principle of federalism, where there is a devolution of power from national to province to your municipalities. So we believe in the principle of federalism. And in line with that also is the principle of subsidiarity. I think it is Germany, for example, where taxes are even collected at a local base. Taxes are not collected at a national base. So in that sense, your national base becomes irrelevant because they are held accountable at a local level. So these two key principles, the principles of subsidiarity and the principles of federalism, the ACDP supports. And I don't know whether that answers the question, but that is our position.
Yeah, it does answer my question, because it means you want to go to a place where the people don't depend on the movement or party for success in future. You do things in a way that people get more and more power over time. It can't happen overnight. It does take time for people to develop, improve themselves. It's a natural human thing. However, when your plan is to gain more and more power and for people to have less power and they become more subject to you, you have a problem. And some movements and parties do exactly that. And you can clearly see it in their actions. Our government is just swelling and swelling and swelling. That is not a government working towards irrelevance. A government will never become irrelevant, but your plan should strive to give more power to individuals on the ground. I call it turning the pyramid on its head, you know, upside down. The people at the top and the leaders at the bottom.
Inverted pyramid, yes.
Yeah, and they must feel the pressure. I mean, the people at the bottom must feel the pressure. So you definitely passed the second question. I had no idea how you were going to do on any of these, by the way. So, okay, question number 3.
I feel like a school pupil back in the test in the exam room again.
Well, a lot of people say people are brave to take this test with me because I've discussed each of these and why I asked them in individual videos. So it is quite daunting. So if a person gets more than 5 out of 10, I think you've done really well. So question 3, do you align with Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals or Agenda 21? And this is where
absolutely not.
Wow,
absolutely no. Absolutely not.
Look, you passed straight away. I didn't expect that.
No. We have some serious concerns with some of these agendas. We have some serious concerns, for example, and I'm going to put it out there because I think even our leader, Dr. Kenneth Meshwe, has made mention of it. We don't need a great reset. We don't need a new normal. We don't need a situation where, in terms of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, who's indicated that you will own nothing and you'll be happy. What does that mean?
You're saying all the right things. I'm starting to smile here.
So I think that we, as the ACDP, we are concerned with what appears to be an elitist globalist agenda to undermine the individual or the sovereign rights of countries and of nations. And so clearly, while some of those, some of the sustainable goals are, when one reads them, are noble in itself.
Yes.
But I think the concern is the influence that some of these may have on the sovereignty of nations. And even though they say that these are not binding. Yeah, they say that these are not binding to any nation. But at the rate things are going, I think anyone who is not reading, who is not listening, doesn't have the ear on the ground politically, should be cautious that they do not find themselves in a difficult place because of that. So it's important that we stay informed. And so yes, I think that clearly the ACDP is concerned about these global agendas, and we have raised those concerns against, for example, an attack on any sovereignty of a nation.
Thank you so much. So you easily passed question number 3. Let's go on to question number 4. Are you exclusive?
We would, the ACDP, as our name indicates, we are the African Christian Democratic Party. We're a party that we are unashamedly Christian. And let me categorize, or let me qualify what I'm saying. Every political party has a particular worldview, whether it's a secular humanist worldview, a communist worldview, a socialist worldview, a green ecology worldview, whatever you have, your political party has a worldview that it espouses to and wishes to propagate. So yeah. The ACDP's worldview is taken. We hold to a biblical worldview. Now, in that biblical worldview, there are, however, values we believe that encompass and that cuts across all races, creeds, religions. It's the value system, for example, of honesty, the value system of integrity, the values of right living or righteousness, the value of justice, those value systems of justice for all, irrespective of who the individual is. These are key value systems, but they are biblical values. And so as the ACDP, we espouse to a biblical worldview. Now, having said that, we understand that to a large extent it is going to be Christians who support us. But Desmond, we also have, in my experience, Muslims who have come to us and said, because of your moral value, the moral stance that you have taken, that no other political party has taken, we will vote for the ACDP. We've had Hindus and Jews, so in other words, people of different religions that have come to us and have said, we will support the ACDP because of those particular stances that you have taken. Now, so some people may see us as being exclusive, and have actually said, and some interviews, some of the interviewers with this SABC and ENCA have actually said, don't you think you should remove the word Christian from your name because it is exclusive, and to some may even be offensive. My simple answer to that is what I've just given. Political parties have their ideology. Do we say to the communist, your particular worldview is offensive to the Christians in South Africa? Do we say to the secular humanist, your worldview is offensive to Christians in South Africa? No. So why should we as Christians apologize for our position? No. So we understand that there will be some who may not support us because of our stance, but we are unapologetic in terms of who we are, and unashamed of who we are. So in terms of inclusivity, we believe in the freedom of religion. It's in our constitution. Yeah. So if the ACDP, and when the ACDP becomes the government of the day, it's not as if, we're going to say, now everybody, you are forced to accept Christ as your Lord and Savior and worship God. We understand that that's not the role of government. And so in our constitution, the ACDP constitution, we believe in the freedom of religion.
Okay, well, that's very important, and it's a difficult decision to make, and I think the people listening need to make that decision for themselves. It's not a call that I can make, because everyone is welcome based on what you've said in the ACDP, and you are unapologetically Christian and based on Christian values, okay, which is an exclusive thing to do, and you are doing that unapologetically. So I think people need to, I think the intention of this question is, do you include everyone in your movement? And some people will strongly feel that because you are called the ACDP, that you are exclusive because of that. And other people will feel strongly that you are inclusive if your constitution allows everyone within the party. So I'm not going to make a call on that one. I'm going to leave it up to the people watching to decide. Okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
The next one, I think you've already answered 5. Do you believe in sovereignty?
Well, yes. No, absolutely. We have answered that. South Africa has to protect its sovereignty, and we cannot give our sovereignty to any nation, over to any nation, any group or entity beyond our borders. We have to protect the sovereignty of our nation and the citizens that live within it.
Okay. Well, we don't have to say anything more. I think it's a fairly simple, straightforward. People either stand for it or they don't.
Sure.
Question number 6. Do you have a savior figure? And I don't mean the savior as in the Christian sense.
Well, I was going to say yes. We do have a savior figure, which is Jesus, as the ACDP. He's our savior figure, and no one else, and no one can actually replace that particular figure.
Well, that answers the question. That answers the question. So,
okay. All right. I'm happy.
So you passed that question. 7. What is your position on CSE?
The ACDP has, I think, been the only party at a national parliamentary level that has tackled the Minister of Education, and at every other opportunity, the other ministers associated who've been wanting to drive the policy of comprehensive sexuality education into our school system. We see it as the sexualization of our children. We have condemned it. The Minister of Education has attempted to sidestep our questions by saying that, trying to downplay our challenging questions at National Parliament in opposition to CSE, by saying that it seems as the ACDP is preoccupied with sex. We are preoccupied with our children being indoctrinated with sexual acts that come from abroad. So we understand where this comes from. And as the ACDP, we will continue to condemn it and fight it with everything that we have. So our position is very clear. One can go and read the ACDP's positions on CSE. And to those who are listening, please go and inform yourself in terms of the roots of CSE, where it is not a South African policy. This comes from Kinsey in my studies, who himself did an experiment on children from between the age of 6 to 10 years old. CSE has its roots in this man who then took it into the United States, the United Nations, and it is USAID, United Nations, that are now pushing this particular agenda throughout the world. We've got to fight it. We cannot allow our children to become sex objects and sexual experiments.
Thank you so much for that. I can testify to the fact that members of the ACDP joined hand in hand with the movement my wife started, #LeaveOurKidsAlone, put their political affiliations aside and walked with the people in 50 different venues on that Thursday while Cyril Ramaphosa was giving his speech in 50 locations across the country in the beginning of 2020 at the State of the Nation address. And that the ACDP was at the forefront, ACDP members were at the forefront of that drive. And they were willing to put party affiliation aside to do that, which tells you that it's not about the party for them. It was absolutely about the cause. So I can testify to that. I'm probably going to have to cut out this portion on YouTube, but I will still put it on Odyssey. So I will make a separate video for Odyssey and YouTube. Otherwise, I'll give it an 18 age restriction and then less people will see it. But thank you so much for that commentary. It is important. And on the group hashtag Leave Our Kids Alone, which has over 130,000 people on there. I believe most of the ACDP members are on there as well. Have spoken about this, have all the documents there, the scripted lesson plans where people can go and see what this is about. So thank you for what you've done in the past as a political movement to actually make people aware of this. You were certainly instrumental in that. Question number 8.
Thank you, Des.
Do you mention color or race vocally and or in organizational documents?
No, I think none of our documents speaks to race. Our policy documents, our constitution. I think that clearly many of us, and myself included at Parliament, have indicated that we need to move even away from racial classification. I cannot understand how, after 27 years of democracy, we still seem to be fixated on race. And what happens is that it divides us. We need to be able to see ourselves as South Africans. It is this that is one of the things that will certainly unite us. But when we have these labels of racial classification in terms of our colors, it is one of the things that keeps us separate. And so as the ACDP, and there are those obviously who would maybe perhaps disagree with us, but I think clearly we need to move towards a raceless nation where your race is not as important as your citizenship, as your allegiance to your country, as your allegiance to your God. And so tribalism, racism and racial categorization is one of the things that divides us. And certainly I think that clearly is the position of the ACDP.
Thank you so much for that. So you passed that one with flying colors, and we certainly need this to become mainstream. To me, it's so important that this movement starts around the country for this to become mainstream thought, where we put all these divisional things aside. It's really important that we do that. So question number 9. The last 2 questions, I think I'm going to find your answers interesting. 9, do you make outlandish statements?
No, outlandish. Some people, I suppose, would call some of our statements when outlandish if we would quote a passage of scripture, and if we would mention, that, for example, the earth, and remind people that the earth is the Lord's. And some may consider that outlandish.
I see that as a religious statement. I don't see it as an outlandish statement.
Well, sure. But I think from a political view, I think that the ACDP has clearly, matured, and I don't recall any outlandish statement that has been made, or don't know of any outlandish statement that has been made by any of our leaders.
I certainly have no record of anything like that, so I do have to agree with you unless someone can prove otherwise. I haven't heard any outlandish statements made. Bold statements certainly, and there's nothing wrong with bold. Outlandish is when you make statements that's just like, where did you get that from? It's like we will investigate why there is lightning that kills people. We do get strange statements. That's not just outlandish, it's like from the Twilight Zone. But sure. So you passed that one. I have no reason to doubt that. Number 10, do you make promises?
Desmond, I don't know whether, look, let me firstly say this. As the ACDP, we believe that it is better to over-deliver and under-promise. So because we've seen the mistake, and we've learned from the mistakes, I think, of some of the bigger political parties, where they have made promises that they could not keep. They've made promises that the fiscus could not afford. So I think that within the ACDP, having learned from that, we've said our position should be under promise, over deliver. But look, every political party also has a manifesto. So I don't know whether the manifesto is considered to be making promises. What our manifesto basically says, this is what we stand for. When the ACDP becomes when the ACDP becomes the government of the day, these are the things that we will look at addressing and improving. So,
promising is literally a leader or the leaders in the party walking around making promises, saying, I promise you that if you elect me, I'm going to build the houses here. I promise you this, I promise you that. There are people literally using the word promise as a way to brainwash people into believing them. It's strong arming, and it takes freedom away. You are removing that person's right to think for themselves through using psychological tactics that remove freedom. So promising is a very strong emotive thing, especially for a lot of kids growing up, their parents promising things and then deliver on the promise. It becomes like an oath almost, or stronger than that. So a lot of those children growing up, when a politician makes a promise to them, they think, oh, that person's going to do it. When they, like you say, cannot physically deliver in the system they're in. I've heard councillors make promises that belong in national government. They absolutely have no place making. And so that's where that comes from. So I can't say that I have any record of the ACDP making promises. So it looks like
like I said, clearly, if we have those promises, would be in our manifestos, it would be in our policy documents. People can, they're out there for people to go and read. This is what we're about. But clearly, I think we believe in rather when we do become, and let me say this, Des, where the ACDP has had influence. For example, let's take right here in the city of Johannesburg, our former MMC for human settlements. He was able to deliver 1,000 title deeds in a matter of 1 month, where his predecessor delivered something like 10 or 100 title deeds in 10 years. But in 1 month, we were able to deliver without even making the promise. But these have been things that the ACDP has been calling for. We have been calling for people to be given title deeds because, title deeds to your home, it acts as a leverage. You're able to borrow, and that you're able to start a business and so on. So that's in city of Johannesburg. In the city of Tshwane, our MMC there was able to save the city, from a fraudulent procurement process, some 2 billion rand. So when we speak about the ACDP being vigilant in terms of fraud and corruption, so we've proven it even in the city of Tshwane, and then also in the city of Nelson, the Nelson Mandela Bay, Gqeberha, I think it is now called. Our MMC there has won accolades for taking rubbish dumps and greening them and turning them into plain fields so that the children don't have to play amongst rubbish and filth and pick up diseases. And he's won awards in Nelson Mandela Bay. So where the ACDP has been in positions of influence and in positions of authority, we have been able to deliver in terms of our manifesto.
Well, I really want to thank you for that. My concerns always, if we remain in the current system, this current system drives greed. It drives, especially when a party grows and they start to get more power. If your plan is not to move away from that power and empower the citizens, you will just end up like everyone else. And this is certainly something that a person needs to consider and think about. And I will strongly encourage the ACDP to consider system change and think about how you would do that and propose that to the people. Because the party political system is finished in this country. I can tell you that now. It's not going to continue the way it is now. The movement on the ground is too strong to move away from that. To stay the way we are, the movement to move away from the current system is so strong in the grassroots now that it's only the mainstream media that can try and thwart it. So it will really help if there are more parties or political movements looking at, in 1994, we had this transition, everyone could vote, but we just left it there. It was supposed to be a transition that continues and improves. What happened is we got stuck somewhere, and people wanted votes to get bums on seats, to get salaries.
Right.
And we need to be very careful of that. And, with power, the removal of freedom becomes the common norm and idea. And, if I see the state that we find ourselves in now, the way the Disaster Management Act was handled, the way Cyril Ramaphosa caused the wearing of a mask illegal if you don't do it in public. That's a lie. It's not illegal not to wear a mask. It's against the regulation not to wear a mask. If you, for instance, don't listen to a police officer or officer of the law that asks you to put on a mask, then you break the law by not listening to them. So there's so many things happening now that takes freedoms away, and we have to be so careful that we don't do that. Now, speaking about the pandemic, when the pandemic happened originally, all the party leaders, and we're done with the interview, you've scored really well. Like I said, the one question is a 50-50. The people need to decide themselves. The promises, the people need to decide themselves. So maybe it's a 9 out of 10 if you halfy it. I don't know, but you've done really well in the interview. You certainly are a movement that stands for freedom, and it's a relief. I'm relieved, to be honest with you. However, I do want you to consider how the ACDP can move forward with this groundswell movement that's happened now, where people want freedom. And when the pandemic happened, the way the government handled it, I believe the government should give people recommendations, options, real evidence. I believe in public engagements. All those things were removed, and I've called for experts on the COVID-19 pandemic to have town hall meetings, even if the people have to sit apart or whatever, and explain how we isolated the virus, how we know that this is the virus that causes COVID-19, so that people can then make informed decisions. But you know what? They cannot actually supply that. And this is worrying, because that if you want people's trust, that is the level you have to go to gain their trust in the information technology world we live in today. You can't just say, but all the scientists say so, so you must just believe it. Because that seems to be the
well, let me say on that, Des, just that one particular point. Well, all the scientists say so, so believe it. That particular statement is not true. Even that, because
but that's a narrative being rolled out.
Well, sure, because it's not all the scientists. Because we also know that there are scientists who are warning about some of the concerns that they are now seeing. But the challenge is, and I want to applaud you for that particular position of, opening up of town halls and having a proper discourse, because this is what true science actually does. Science doesn't shut down a particular voice just because it disagrees with a particular narrative. Science is investigative. Science is objective. It's not subjective. Science interrogates. Science listens to the different voices. And so one of our concerns within the ACDP is the shutting down of any voice or any narrative that is against what is currently being spoken of in the mainstream media. So when you talk about the science, whose science? Is it objective? Is it inclusive? Does it involve the other voices? Are we taking into account the considerations that other scientists have indicated, where there are particular warnings about where we currently are? It is important to be objective and listen to the other voices, but sadly, it's not been done.
And that is important. This part of the interview I will also reserve for Odyssey, so people can go and view it on Odyssey, my Odyssey channel. And
Sure.
I do have to.
But let me, sorry, Des, can I just say one other thing?
Yeah, sure.
What we as the ACDP, just in terms of the current the pandemic, what we as the ACDP have called for and consistently called for, because we are not anti-vaxxers. I'm not an anti-vaccination person. I've had all of my vaccines. I've had to take my yellow fever and whatever other vaccines when I travel. So I'm certainly not anti-vaccine. But we have called for vaccines that are safe. And having followed due process, vaccines that are safe, interrogate, and like I've been saying, they need to be interrogated through a proper process. Vaccines that are not mandatory. So we cannot be forcing any vaccines upon individuals. And then also we're looking at informed consent. So the content of those vaccines must be made available. So this is the position that the ACDP has consistently held to, and we will consistently hold to that as we move ahead.
Thank you so much, Wayne.
Thank you. Yeah, so thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed the conversation, and like I said, it's also caused for me to dig deep. But let me also say, just in terms of if you have any documentations, you're talking about systems change, for example, we would welcome as the ACDP those who have ideas for us to actually consider. And it's important that that as the ACDP we consider these ideas in terms of what you call system changes, in the country, to the constitution, to the political systems, and so on. So we would welcome whatever documentations or thoughts even that you have on that. Please, feel free to send it to us.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I'm so glad that there is a movement, party, organization out there, because I'll be interviewing all of those that have passed with flying colors or aced the freedom test. Obviously, there's many other things a person can test. But sure. I'm sure you'll see the wisdom of my questions with regards to freedom. And sure. I don't think a lot of people consider that, people making promises that they cannot keep, just making promises in general. I believe in the philosophy of doing things. Be quiet and just do it. And, through your actions, you'll be known. And to me, that is more important than saying things. And I think the way things are done in the political system now needs to change in future to one that's more pure. And I think we'll get there. You said earlier that our democracy is maturing. And I think the time is right now for those changes to start happening. Seeing posters all over lampposts. Think about that. What does that say? It means that you are not known on the ground and you're trying to convince someone through a poster on a lamppost. And I always call it the battle of the posters between the ANC and the DA and the EFF. It becomes this pure poster battle. And I'm not saying people shouldn't use posters for awareness. What I'm saying is that mindset needs to change, where the electorate knows the councillor that they're voting for, because the councillors actually spend time with him. Where the electorate knows the MP that they will hopefully vote for in future. Remember, that needs to happen because the Concord ruling said that you should be able to directly elect your MPs and MPLs in future by 2024. I don't know how they're going to do that at this stage, because our constitution doesn't really allow it, because it is based on the party system. So already things are in transition, and I don't think that transition will stop. And hopefully the ACDP can play a role in that transition. And based on the fact that the ACDP has a strong focus on freedom based on this test, you need to be at the forefront of driving these things, and you will get the support. So thank you very much for your time, and all the best with fighting for freedom out there, freedom of all sorts. Thank you.
Well, it's also perhaps not coincidental, perhaps Providence that our slogan for these local elections is liberty.
Wow,
The
that's
liberties,
amazing.
as we've spoken about, of many around the world are being eroded. And as South Africans, we need to continue to uphold and fight for the liberties that we currently have.
Thank you so much. I think that's a
And
good note.
thank you.
Thank you for
And
taking
thank you,
the time
Desmond.
out.
Thank you for having me. Much
Okay.
appreciated. God bless you.
Keep well. Bye-bye.
Bless you. Bye-bye.